go. Welcome to the Digital Forensics Now podcast. Today is Thursday, November 14th, 2024. My name is Alexis Brignoni, aka Briggs. I'm accompanied by my co-host, and before I tell you my co-host, I want to take the overlay so I can see her face. My co-host, the justified tool grumbler, the organizer queen, the hardest working squirrel east of the Mississippi, the one and only Heather Charpentier.
Oh my god.
The music is Higher Up by Shane Ivers and can be found at silvermansound.com. Heather.
Hello.
You see, these abrupt endings, I hate it. Obviously, you know why I had all these little monikers for you this week.
I do. A few other people do too, but I definitely understand the organizer queen, especially. Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Well, today is a really special day, and I'm glad I've seen some folks already coming in from YouTube. And so if you can, leave some comments, say hi. We got a special show today, so we're going to really get to it. Actually, you know what? Yeah, I think we should get to it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So we have a special guest today, is the one and only Chris Vance. And I got a quick intro before I bring him in. I know Chris for many years. Actually, we presented some years ago at the D4 Summit, one of the D4 Summits in Austin. I would say maybe 5-6 years ago. And he is really well known in the community, an expert that I respect a lot as a person and as an expert in what he does. Specializes in iOS when I met him, but now he specializes in all sorts of mobile forensics. He works at Magnet Forensics, one of their resident experts there. And we brought him in to discuss the iOS 18 rebooting issue that has been the talk of the news and talk of the town. So let me bring Chris in. Hello, Chris.
Hey, everybody.
Hi, Chris.
What's up? We got some folks in the chat. Hi, everyone. So again, Chris, I give you an introduction, but we all know you really well. Everybody knows you. So tell us. So iOS's devices are rebooting. People are losing their minds. Why is that? What's happening?
Yeah, and so this is an issue that we've been tracking for kind of a while now. This has been something that I've been seeing and trying to get my head around probably for at least the last 6 months, maybe 9. And it wasn't really contained just to iOS 18. This is something that's been going on. There was a big delay in some of the access that we had in 17. It was just, 17 was difficult. So a lot of folks were asking me, hey, we got it to this phone. We saw that it was rebooted. What happened? What's going wrong? We keep seeing this. And digging into it, we started looking at different things and trying to figure out what's going on. After a while, I started to notice a trend. And that's one of the big things that I do in my job right now is I look at the trends in the industry. I look at what's happening with a lot of the different devices that are out there. And I try to stay ahead of them as much as I possibly can. Just trying to get hey, what's the next thing that the community is going to want to know about so I can rip that apart first. The big one has been okay, so why is this happening? So I started to notice after a while a certain pattern. And anytime anybody would ask me, I'd pull out my best, good old fashioned Johnny Carson impersonation, hold an envelope to my head. Let me guess, iPhone 15's probably something it's iOS 17.4 or higher. And they're like, how'd you do it?
You said that to me recently.
Yeah. And it's nothing special. It's just, that's what I happen to notice. What we typically found, now I obviously don't have access to all of these magic devices out there. It's not like I can go out there and get evidence items. But what I found from looking into anything that did reboot, it was usually a memory maintenance issue. And this is just like any computer, right? When you run too much in the process memory for too long, you are opening yourself up to potential crashes. And so what iOS does is it says, hey, you know what? Process memory's been running too high for too long. We're just going to do a nice little soft reboot. Because if you think about it, what's really going to happen to the end user if I reboot my device?
Right.
Not much, right?
No.
It's, maybe all of a sudden my contacts aren't showing up number wise to name wise, and I just got to unlock my device. So it's kind of like a nice little safety mechanism for them. They don't have to worry about, a device going into a kernel panic. They don't have to worry about anything, major crashes kind of happening. And anyone that I got a hold of, even ones that I may have purposefully tried to break myself, Magnet knows me. Folks that know me kind of outside of Magnet, my internal title at Magnet literally is the breaker of things. So I take my job very seriously. But when, even when I was trying to do this myself, I always, got the same call in the unified logs: system memory reset. One word, system memory reset. And we put that in the blog that we put out yesterday, because that's typically what we saw when it was a memory maintenance issue. That's why the device rebooted.
Yep.
Now, cut forward to iOS 18, and it was a little bit different. We were already, we've been looking at iOS 18 a lot. I personally have. We do Mobile Unpacked over at Magnet, which is my web show I get to do once a month. Basically, just some hey, free stuff for the community. I try to make it no product, but here's something that we found. 18 was my big thing recently. Digging into the artifacts, didn't see much of this one. When all the big hoopla kind of started, we dug in deeper, digging in really deep, trying to find what we could find. And I started doing my own testing, and sure enough, almost to the second, 72 hours, there it went, like clockwork. So we did a bunch of testing internally. Our guys are some of the best of the best of the best and brightest that it comes to with our internal dev team, and I could not be more proud and privileged to work with those folks. But I'm just the artifact monkey, as I call myself. I like to keep stuff apart, and they tell me what it actually means. But honestly, we were able to find that, confirm what a lot of folks were saying. It was added in 18.0. It was originally a 7-day timer in 18.0. They shortened it to 3 days, 72 hours in 18.1. And the only thing that is going to make this timer go away is unlocking the device. It's not tied to the airplane mode or the network settings. It's not tied to the charging state. You can't put a mouse jiggler on this, right?
I read that one a lot.
Yeah, let's go back to the mouse jiggler days. I wish, right?
It's not a Windows box.
Yeah. It's not like we're waiting for it to go to sleep mode or anything.
Right.
It's 100% tied to the lock state. So even trying something like a failed password attempt, which I never recommend, because you never know what you're going to do with that. There's a lot of things that could go wrong there, especially when you don't know how many times other people have tried a password before they've given it to you. It's just one of those things that's not going to work. The only thing that's going to reset that without using some sort of tool is going to be a actual unlocking that device. That is why fundamentally it's just going to change how we have to deal with iPhones. We have to treat every single iOS device now as a volatile piece of evidence. And I think that's just the way we have to look at it. I don't really think it's going to, it's not great, but as long as we start treating this as just another volatile piece of evidence, then we can handle that. We got 3 days that we know we have a timer, just like any other piece of evidence, physical or non-physical, that we have to work with. We know, and not to date myself of how long I've been doing digital forensics, but when I first got into digital forensics, we still had call detail records that had content. We could get text messages, like the content of them. Oh, but we had to act fast, right? It was like we had 24 hours at max to get that preservation order, and we knew we didn't get it, we weren't getting it. So it's kind of like that again. We know we have to move quick on these things. We have to move forward. We have to preserve that data. I think there's going to be a lot of back and forth kind of arguments on legal wise with this. I think it's going to bring up some good debates over what is seizure, what is search. I've got my own opinions about this. Some might say I'm wrong. I frequently am, but I've got my own opinions about, hey, imaging the device is imaging the device. I would, kind of put this the same way as I'm seizing a physical device to keep somebody from tampering with it. I'm seizing an image to keep the device from tampering with it. I'm not searching it. Jurisdictions aren't always going to see it that way. So
No.
I'm in good old Fourth Circuit. It's going to be very different from Ninth Circuit. Going to be very different from the federal system. Going to be very different from international courts. So I can't speak for all of that, and I'm sure it's going to bring some awesome debates as we go along with this.
And let me ask you this, Chris, because I mean, part of that is the whole access to content, right? Because you're saying I'm preserving, therefore I'm not accessing content, and most tools when they preserve, that's not preserve. Let me say this: when you start the even when you unlock it with a tool, right? Even if you don't do the extraction, it's gonna tell you what the IMEI is, who the possible account is. I mean, do you think vendors will have to say, look, let's give users like a preservation mode where not even that is shown, right? Because I could see some jurisdictions saying, well, you got the IMEI, you got identifiers for the account, numbers, search. So I think maybe, what do you think? Maybe vendors should maybe think about providing like this preservation piece that doesn't show you absolutely anything, maybe an ID indicator of preservation that's not tied to anything on the device. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, no, I think there's a couple of different ways to look at it. We've had some very lively internal discussions already since this has kicked off. And I can't really say too much here, but we have a plan moving forward on how we're going to deal with it and how we're going to handle it. But I think vendors will probably approach this differently. Some might opt for a system where they do a collection with absolutely zero display to the user and just say, hey, it's here. But, the moment that you touch it, we're going to log that you touched it, kind of thing, like with an audit trail, which I'm not opposed to because I love logs. I spend all day in logs. That's what I do. But at the same time, some have talked about, well, what if the tool were to encrypt this file and, the decryption key would have to be used. And then that makes a record of the fact that the decryption key was generated. I think there's a lot of different ways the vendors can tackle it. I think that we will have to understand as a community, and I'm going to say this as someone who works for a vendor, that's not going to happen overnight.
No.
Backlogs are a thing, and I did not learn this. I used to be, I went from being a analyst to being a trainer for Magnet and some other vendors to then suddenly working in product management and internal development stuff. And boy, did I not realize how big backlog was a thing for them too. I mean, backlog is a dirty word everywhere. But like, we can't just go and like say, hey, forget everything that we've been talking about doing, and now we got to do this. I think vendors are going to have to do some different things. Vendors might have to change things, and laws are going to change the way we do things. But it's going to take a little time. And I think that we're just kind of in a bit of a wait and see moment with that, and just kind of see how the community reacts.
Yeah, no, and go ahead.
For now, though, so we don't always have access immediately to these devices that are potentially going to be rebooting within 72 hours. Can you share anything about what the plans are to help that to stop happening?
No.
Okay. But there are plans in the works, I hear, all over the place. So I guess watch for it.
The best that I can say is, we always have best intentions and plans to provide the best access day one. But, it's a cat and mouse game, and it always will
Right.
be.
Yes.
But the best I can say is the moment that you get anybody can get their hands on one of these devices, you've got to move forward with preservation or capturing it or whatever that's going to end up looking like for, you know, whatever tool you're using. If you're in a space where you have the passcode, you have consent, you know, you're not going to be in that situation. This is going to be for devices where, and that's a big thing. We've had a lot of people wondering, like, how is it going to impact in the corporate system, or how's it going to, it's really only going to impact where you have a non-compliant device, someone who's unable to give up the passcode or unwilling to give up the passcode,
Right.
and you have to gain lawful access to that device without the consenting keys. And that's really where it's going to be an issue. And I think that's just the one thing that we're just going to have to kind of see where it goes. It's going to be a cat and mouse game for sure, but that's what keeps us on our toes. So.
No, I
Sir,
mean,
go ahead. Nope,
you
go ahead.
first. Well, just real quick. I mean, yeah, just
Yeah.
real quick. Chris, you mentioned how, and I do appreciate the background you gave, because you're mentioning how memory gets filled, and for the vendor, I say vendor in the sense of providers like Apple, right? It's good for them to fight the device to restart, let's say when the person's sleeping or not using it, because then the user doesn't see um any the product not working correctly, when I'm like degradation of the product, right? And I appreciate you saying that, and tell me what you think about the next thing I'm gonna say. So I've seen some folks, especially in my law enforcement circle, saying, "Well, Apple did this just to mess with us," and my first take is, well, they owe it to their clients, and I think what you said kind of fits into that. This might be more of a feature for better, if they're for kind of cleaning that memory out, for that the system works better, more than just trying to thwart anything as a security measure, I would say. I mean, I guess we can't read Apple's mind, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and we can't read Apple's mind. I mean, like, if you, and you'll appreciate this as one of my green bubble friends, but if we take a look at the Android ecosystem, I mean, some of the Android devices have been doing this for a while. Yeah, sure, Graphene has been doing this for a long time. Obviously, Graphene is security focused, but at the same time, you know, we have in iOS never really had that issue before. But we've never had all of the things running on the iPhone that we've quite had at this level before. It has been very interesting for me to watch all of the things that are running on a locked iPhone throughout this process. And a lot of folks say, you know, like, there can't be that much going on, right? There can't be that much happening on a device that's just locked in an airplane mode. And you know, there's a lot going on. Like, you hook one of these things up and you watch stream, and I'm not talking about high level, you know, hooking into the device, just streaming the unified logs. It's insane how many processes are running, how many things are happening in the background. There's a lot more than you think. And Apple does have a responsibility to their customers, especially as their customers more and more are in different sectors. They're in, you know, the governments all over the world being used. They're in private industry all over the world. They're in the militaries all over the world. And being in that space, they want to make sure their devices are well protected. They want to make sure their devices are well protected against different kinds of attacks. And one of the best ways to clear out, you know, bad stuff is to reboot your device, you know? And so I think Apple doing this, do I think it was a security measure? Potentially. Apple hasn't updated the security document guide yet, as I said in the blog that I wrote that went out. You know, it's been a couple months, but still haven't put it out yet. So, you know, probably around January, February, we might get one. But I think, in my personal opinion, it was probably a security measure. Was it specifically to mess with the digital forensics industry? No. This is a service to the overall end user to protect the overall end user's privacy, to protect the overall end user's general experience. Because the more that an end user's device just, has problems, they're not going to like it. It's an inactivity timer, so it's not like it's just going to happen overnight. It's the same point. So it's also does make me, maybe I'm just projecting, but I feel a little hurt by it, Apple. Come on. But in the end of it, it probably was a security measure for the general user. I mean, Apple has said for years they're the privacy phone. And that's been their position for a long time.
No, that makes absolute sense. Go ahead, Heather. You had a question?
No, actually, you already talked about it.
Oh, okay, perfect. No, I guess the last point I would like to make is, so you mentioned about treating devices, right, as volatile, right? And we kind of knew this because, like, Knowledge C, if you every day you miss data or the biomes now, but like we never, like, we say it, but people leave it there for a few days and they don't mind about it. But now they lose the access, right? So any best practices you can share right now in regards to that, or we just stuck with having to hopefully unlock it and go from there? I mean, what's your state of play right now?
Honestly, my best practices haven't changed at all. I've said the same thing. So since I was back in training and I helped to develop some of the original mobile classes for Magnet, same thing I've been preaching for years, is soon as that device comes into your possession, image it.
Yes.
I don't care if you have 1,700 cases in the backlog ahead of it. That's fine. Image it today, not 6 months from now, not 6 weeks from now, not 6 days from now, today. Get it imaged as soon as you possibly can once it comes in the lab. And a lot of folks ask me why. A few years ago, and I haven't updated it in a long time, and shame on me, been a little busy, but I wrote a bit of a guide on the volatility of iOS data. And I looked at data across the iOS file system, and I measured how volatile is this data. Some of the artifacts that we know and love, 24 hours. Like some of the records and some of the databases, you're only getting in the last 24 hours worth of, right? Power log, one of my personal favorites. I mean, as Alexa said, we did a SANS presentation years ago. He could not get me to shut up about the power log database back then, right? And that thing, 14 days, that's half of what we get in Knowledge C or the SegBs, because we probably should call them SegBs and not biomes.
Thank you, Chris.
You just made his night.
I take full my own part of that responsibility for all the blogs that I wrote on them, because we as a community are not the most imaginative bunch when it comes to naming. Hey, what do we call it? It's in a folder called biomes. That's a good idea. But we got 28 to 30 days, whatever you want to say there. Power logs were 14. Some of those records are, 24 hours. We've got cache locations or 7 days. Why wait? What's the harm in imaging now? If you have legal jurisdiction, if you have the authority to search that device, why wait? You are not gaining any new data by waiting, and you only are opening yourself up to the potential for less data.
Yep.
The data is not like that image. If I take that image today, it's not going to change in 6 months when I finally get around to analyzing the case.
Right.
That image is still going to be the same, and I know it's still going to be the same because I'm going to have all the right hash values. Versus if I just take the phone, well, now I don't really know what I could have missed. So my opinion is unchanged from, to me, yeah, this is a thing we have to deal with, but I don't see it as a doom and gloom. I see it as just proving my point. Get the device, get it imaged.
Yes, definitely.
That's how it is.
Definitely.
No, I mean, Chris, we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and speak to the community about this issue. That's been like a really, really hot button,
Yeah.
relevant thing. So, we appreciate you for coming on, and we're gonna bring you next time for other things if you let us. So,
Anytime.
Definitely.
all right, I appreciate it, man. Again, thank you for the Sec B thing. I'm gonna mention more about that later.
Yeah, and anybody listening, we'll share that that
Thanks,
blog
Chris.
post that Chris wrote.
Take care.
We'll share that in the show notes. Thank you so much, Chris.
All right.
Awesome.
So, that was that was
You
great.
heard it from the source. What we should be doing with these phones. We should stop freaking out because everybody's freaking out. I was freaking out.
Yes.
And just do what we all say we should do and do it faster.
Yeah, I mean, and it goes with that due diligence, right? Look, if actually, I think we should get into the topic, right? Chris was mentioning really clearly about, well, data preservation, right?
Yes.
What's the deal with that? And it depends, how he said, on the state, a state literally where you live or where you are working,
Right.
and the jurisdiction that you're working, right? So, what do we have on that? I mean, what are the different practices that you come around?
I mean, so the question is, should we be able to extract the data? A lot of people actually have been mentioning it on LinkedIn. Should we be able to extract the data before legal authority to search the data is signed, is approved by a court, by a judge? And I think Jessica Hyde actually has a post on her LinkedIn right now where there's a back and forth between a lot of people in the community talking about the pros, the cons, what they think is going to happen in the future with this. But there's some comments on there that I thought were worth sharing. Let me grab those.
Absolutely.
So, Chris, I grabbed one of Chris Vance's. He equates it to taking the physical device so it can't be tampered with. We're simply taking the data so it can't be tampered with. He said that on Jessica's post, and he just said it in his talk a minute ago. There's also talk about how most judges don't understand data. Superior courts generate a decision without comprehending what they're deciding on. This then trickles to the lower courts, who generate decisions without comprehending what the other judges who didn't comprehend generated decisions on. And we look like deer in the headlights while these decisions are made because of how inaccurate those decisions are. Tom Lilienthal wrote that. I thought that was an excellent, an excellent fact about the knowledge.
I think that speaks to the fact that we're depending a lot of case law, right? At least from my perspective, the ideal scenario is to have, whatever lawmakers from that jurisdiction say, you're allowed to do these things, you're not allowed to do these things, and have proper codification of what that is. But we don't, right? So we depend on the case law. Like he was saying, a judge case on back case law, and then other judges depend on that case law, and then it gets propagated. And like you were saying, I think that speaks to the technical expertise of the judges, but also the person explaining to it. Let me bring Brett, because Brett is in the chat. Brett is great. He says, well, how about exigent circumstances, right? And that's a tough one, right? Because you could say, well, if I don't preserve this, I'm gonna lose it. That's an exigent circumstance. Mm-hmm. But on that jurisdiction, what does exigent circumstance mean? In some jurisdiction, it might mean like the loss of data is not an exigent circumstance in a jurisdiction. Maybe just the loss of life or something of the sort, right? Or maybe if we don't get this data, there's a time bomb, right? Some sticking, or we gotta kidnap person, right? And again, those are good points. Don't get me wrong. Like, can we maybe build some case law around considering the loss of data as an exigent circumstance? That's a good point. I mean, I think it's a good argument as well. Also, there's counter arguments on how do we do that. I'm gonna give my opinion real quick because that's what I do here.
Go for it.
I think one way of threading that needle between case law and preserving and seizing, because now we're making this distinction in the digital realm, like Jess was saying in the chat, that preservation is not search, right? That seizure. Actually, we can even separate it further. You got seizure. I got the thing, the physical thing. Then the contents I preserve, and then I have to look into them, right? So there's 3 different aspects there. And sometimes I believe the law is not really clear and what the interplay is on that. So one way of threading the needle, I think, and I mentioned with Chris, is maybe the tools need to give us some way of blindly preserving data, right? Put that blindfold in front of us and saying,
right,
we got the data, and yes, we got it. I don't know what it is. I have no way of knowing what it is, because I don't think courts want to just trust blindly. They rather have us be blind than they trust blind, which I guess kind of makes some sense in a certain way, right?
Yeah.
And if tool makers, I believe, and this is an opinion. Again, I don't. We haven't said it. We have to say it. Any opinions expressed by Heather or myself, they're only talking about ourselves as examiners in the community and do not represent the opinions, beliefs, or practices of our employers. They have nothing to do with them. Okay. So
Nope.
back to this. Back to the comment. If vendors go about doing that, then I think that pretty solves a lot, because we as examiners, we can deal with the looking at the data, but the extraction of the data, that's a thing that we kind of outsource to vendors for many reasons that are obvious, right? In regards to be able to preserve the access and other things, and the research that goes into it and so forth. So I don't know, maybe vendors should start thinking of, hey, let's create some like a preservation mode, maybe, right? Not just extraction and parsing, maybe preservation under extraction, and then regular extraction, and then your parsing as part of the workflow that needs to happen in order to kind of create good case law, I think.
Right. Yeah. It all has to start with the case law. So I'm going to cite a case, actually, Riley v. California. This just shows how like kind of out of touch people are about digital evidence, but they held in Riley v. California, and it's not the entirety of this case, but they held that police officers have the ability to preserve evidence while waiting a search warrant by disconnecting the phone from the network and placing it in a Faraday bag. So that just doesn't work anymore with mobile devices. That's not preserving anything. And I think that's probably still the understanding of a lot of people who are making the decisions, who just aren't aware of how digital evidence works.
Well, I mean, I think it speaks to the threat scenario of somebody remoting into the phone, right, and deleting things. I think
that for sure.
Yeah, that's the mentality behind it, which again, it's a mentality that's valid, but it's also really dated, right? Because now we know, especially with the newer phones, right, that the destruction process, not so much somebody coming in, which could happen. It's the phone itself. Like the normal, like Chris was saying, the normal operations of the phone. There's so much things going on, right?
Right.
So now we have to take into account a non-malicious actor here, which is the phone itself, right? And how do we update that across all the stakeholders? That's a tall order. So I think tooling that does some of that for us can help, but that doesn't substitute, again, us being able as a community to explain to the stakeholders what the deal is, how this actually operates, and give them the proper arguments for being able to allow what we now believe or we should push, which is that seizure, that preservation, and that search, right? And I appreciate that Jess kindly put it in the chat as a good summary.
Yeah,
there. Perfect.
Yeah,
so that's a good thing. That's awesome.
I think she definitely started a big conversation on LinkedIn. So if people have different opinions or are seeing different things in their jurisdictions, join that conversation in the comments on her LinkedIn post, on Jessica Hyde's LinkedIn post, because there's already some great ideas and kind of like back and forth in the comments.
Oh yeah, the best thing about the show is if you're listening in the podcast later, watching the video later. Well, watching the video, you'll see the comments. But if you're listening only, you're gonna miss the experts we have in the chat. We have the most.
Oh yeah.
I think this is the most expert pack hour you will ever come across on digital forensics, and I'm not kidding. I'm not exaggerating here.
Right.
Like right now in the chat, you got Brett giving some other scenarios, like legal scenarios. Let's imagine a suspect that goes into a house searching a suspect without a warrant, right? So, and that's the whole point about case law, right? There's a lot of quote unquote exceptions or circumstances. Now, how do those relate to our digital realm? And we're living in the moment that those are being made. So always take time to think, reach out to folks that have been around longer, like a Jess, like a Brett, like a Heather right here, right? And because you want to make sure that whenever you talk to your prosecutors or your stakeholders, you're giving your best explanation, your best argument, because we depend on you to actually push forward good case law, right? That your judges and your juries, not juries, but your judges and the people responsible give you good procedures, good case law that makes everybody's work more efficient, better, faster, and brings justice, with speed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and let's face it, nobody wants their name on the bad case law. So make sure you're researching and have those good explanations on why it's necessary. I think there's plenty of explanation on why it's necessary to preserve that data. It just needs to be paid to the people that make the decisions in a competent manner so that we can get this moving.
That absolutely, and again from all aspects. One last thing I want to say here is that SWEG-DE is coming out with some protocols and best practices on the preservation feature of digital mobile items.
Yeah.
And if you're not familiar with this group, we're talking about experts that come together and have meet multiple times a year to be at the forefront of technology and how that will impact law and the work that we do. So I highly recommend folks to follow their products and their meetings. I wish one day I will go to a meeting.
I gotta go too. As soon as it's back over on the East Coast, I'm going.
Yeah, look, I might pay my own way because that's
Okay.
that's yeah. So it's really good to follow. So it's highly recommended. So you got any other thoughts on the topic? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just Jessica said there's some thoughts that oppose the idea of preserving the evidence without having the proper legal authority in place. And I was reading some of those today. Definitely go check them out. There's some really good points on opposition to it and really good points on support for it. So definitely check those out.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and again, developments. I mean, we talk about pretty much the first half hour developments in iOS, right? But I think we should take some time to talk a little bit about some developments in Android 15, which came out. At least I got the update maybe a few days ago.
Right.
So it's pretty recent. So what do we got on Android? So we don't feel left out in the show.
Yeah, let's add some Android. So I specifically was taking a look at an Android 15 update called Private Space. So if you haven't heard of Private Space yet, it's in the Android. I'm going to actually pull up. I did a little PowerPoint to show how it works. So let me find that real quick.
And that update is rolling out for everybody pretty soon if you don't have it already. So
yeah, so immediately had to go test it and check it out. But now in the Android, under Settings, Security and Privacy, there's a new area under Privacy called Private Space. It says that it'll keep private apps locked and hidden. To set that up, you just click on the Private Space and go through the steps to set it up. It tells you all about what that is, how it hides and locks your private apps in a separate space. And it has its own dedicated Google account for extra security. So you can set it to your Google account you already have, but you can also set it to a brand new Google account when you do the setup. So I set the Private Space up on my test phone and created a new Gmail account for the Google account. Set it up, created a password, and then it creates the new private space. Once you create the new private space, it asks you how you want to lock your private space. The options are pattern with fingerprint, pin with fingerprint, or password with fingerprint. And one thing I thought it was going to do is just grab the fingerprint that I use on my device already. And it didn't. It had me reset up an entirely new fingerprint. So that private space could be locked with the fingerprint of a different user if you wanted to do that. It doesn't draw from your original user account. I set mine up with a pattern in the fingerprint. And it says all set when you're done. Then to locate your private space, you go to the app screen and scroll all the way to the bottom of all of the installed apps that are on your Android device. At the bottom, there's just a little spot that says private with a lock. You touch that lock and the fingerprint unlock will pop up. You can also choose to use the pattern lock if you want to. And then you have your own private space. It comes pre-installed with camera, Chrome, contacts, files, photos, Pixel Buds, because mine's a Pixel, and the Play Store. I installed Snapchat on this particular device, but then I also put it on another device and installed a few more apps just to check it out. In the settings of the private space, you also have some options to change that lock. You can change the options on how it locks. So I have mine set to every time my device locks, that private space locks, but you can set it to other options where it doesn't lock. It remains open when your device is open. There's the option to hide the private space. I didn't try that because I didn't want to see if it disappeared on me. I didn't want to have to try and figure out how to find it and then be scrambling for my explanation here. But I will try it. And then you can delete the private space. I extracted my phone afterwards. I have not had a ton of time to mess around with the artifacts that are stored there, but it comes in as a whole separate user account under data, user, and then whatever number it assigns the user account. in my, oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, and folks that are listening, this is a great image that Heather puts up, because you can see those user directories, both user and user DE, and you
Mhm.
can see the two accounts. And if you're familiar with Android forensics, the 0 tends to be that main user, right?
Mhm.
And then you see that you see 10. And this kind of makes sense, because Heather said a second ago, you can set up a new Google account. You have to set new fingerprints. You have a whole set of apps, I say copy, but another set of apps in the space. So this is literally creating another user for this, enable this ability, right? And this is something that it was predicted. Some folks figure it out maybe more than a year ago, by looking at some of the code base that's being pushed out by Google in Android, right? How they're using that second, like an extra user for these purposes. But this is not the first time we've seen this, right? I think we saw it on Samsung's first, I think, right?
The secure folder.
Yeah. So
Ooh.
if you're familiar with secure folders, what, 150, I think, right?
Yeah, 150.
Yeah, user 150, you're a Samsung device, that's a secure folder. The moment you see that there, you know a secure folder, it's sitting there from that phone. So I think it's more like an implementation, like Google's implementation of maybe stuff that Samsung was been doing for a while now.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. So this set up on one of my devices, it set it up as user account 10, and on the other one, it set it up as user account 11. I'm not quite sure what the difference was there. Like, if I had something else installed on one of the phones, but I have a 10 and 11 on each phone. And then, in like parsing the data with some of the tools that we all love and use. Some of the stuff is parsed if you have access. Obviously, when you do the extraction, if you have access to that private space, a tool that will pull the data and bypass that lock. Some of it's parsed. Installed applications are parsed for the private space account. I found some of my chat messages. So I had Text Me installed on one of my devices. And when I pulled it, the text me messages were there, and you can differentiate where that app was residing just based on the path. That 10 or 11 user account will be in the path versus the original path for the 0 user. I did notice that some stuff wasn't parsed exactly perfect. With the installed applications on some tools, I was getting just the installed applications from the new private space account, and I wasn't seeing the data surrounding the installed applications for the original user account. And then on some tools, I saw more data than others just parsing, which is to be expected in between tools. But good news, there were updates made to A-Leap by someone I know to account for the additional user account and the installed applications that reside in the private space.
Yeah. Whoever that was, I don't like him. I think
I don't either.
He's full of himself.
He's sketchy. But it's a really cool app to check out, or account to check out on your test phones. Try that out. See if it'll even extract. I mean, you have to have access. So you'd have to have access to unlock the device and unlock the private space to be able to pull that data for now, until we have brute force options for Android 15. But definitely a lot of cool stuff to check out and see how that works and contribute back to the community with your findings.
Yeah, and please, I mean, if you're dealing, it's my take. If you're dealing with an Android 15 device, no matter what it is, right? And you have multiple extraction tools, try them all, right? Because in our experience, a particular workflow might give you some of that personal space data, and another workflow, even within the same tools, might not. And I cannot pinpoint why that is, because you got to remember that some of these extraction methods, they're abstractions to us. They tell you press here to get this, and that's it. We don't see the inner workings of it. So my recommendation is try different workflows between tools and different workflows within the one tool that you're using. All right, because you might get more data from the personal space in one workflow that you will get from another one.
Right. There's a question: do you have to unlock the private space using the passcode or fingerprint prior to acquisition? I have found that yes, for now. But like I said, when there's those brute force options added to tools, whatever your tool of choice is, it should be able to additionally brute force that private space, is my understanding. Hopefully I'm correct about that. We'll see in the future when there's brute force support for the Android 15s.
Yeah, and again, that speaks to also what process will we use for this, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of variability there. Maybe we can get to the phone and it's fingerprint. Can we get a court order to compel the fingerprint from a suspect? Like
Right.
again, it all builds up. It's like another level more that now we have to go through. And the first thing we need to do to go through these levels is know that they're there. That's why we're putting this out in the community, so you're all aware of what different issues might come if you're finding Android 15s and you're expecting something to be on the phone and it's not there. Well, think about it. It might be inside a private space. How do we go about it? How do we go unlocking that? Maybe in our interview procedures, add that as an investigator. Say, hey, yeah, what's your PIN code, right? What's the private space? What do you mean about? Well, you know what I'm talking about. and also kind of elicit that information in our interviews or interrogation techniques. I mean, the knowledge needs to be out there, so then investigators, detectives, and examiners, and even prosecutors can adjust, and civil world as well, for discovery procedures and civil litigation, can adjust to this new technology that's coming out.
Right, definitely. Well, that's what I have on Android 15 so far. I'm looking forward to looking for other things to test and present, but so far that's what I've started with.
Oh no, and it's good stuff. This whole having multiple users that are tied to the one user, that speaks also to provenance, right? We have multiple user accounts here. Are they tied to a private space? Are they tied to a secure folder? Are they tied to an actual other user, right? We need to make sure that our tools differentiate between those and give us the proper information. I don't want only the history of install apps for my main user. What about user 10? What about user 11, right?
Right.
Our tools need to respond to that. And right now, some of them don't. And even the community tooling like iLeap, we had to scramble, right?
Yeah.
Jessica, Heather, I'm reading Jessica now. Heather told me about it and we jumped on it just to make sure that we can provide that support. So that's something to be on the lookout.
Well, and have it done before we presented this tonight, definitely.
Oh, I mean, of course. We have to make sure we make it all look sensible and look good.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, so if anybody has additional things they're seeing in Android 15, write to me. I would love to hear about it, and I'll do some testing. I love testing stuff, so I'll do some testing for you if you don't have the devices or don't have the time or capability at the moment to do it.
And if you're wondering, how do I get rid of these, get a hold of these nice people that are talking to me here on this podcast, there's two main ways, right? You can go and look for our LinkedIn presence, Digital Forensics Now podcast, and Google search us there. Or you can go to Blue Sky, Heather, Blue Sky.
No.
It's a kind of like a Twitter-like social media site now. Go to Blue Sky and also look for Digital Forensics Now podcast there. Before Heather jumps on my whole Blue Sky comment, I want to say that we are trying to get examiners into Blue Sky because I believe it's a good method of kind of short, quick communication, establish conversations that other platforms are kind of cumbersome or are full of junk in a sense. And I think I'm hoping we can create the Twitter experience of 7-8 years ago within Blue Sky. So I see a lot of good people moving in. It has a lot of momentum. The moderation tools in Blue Sky are fantastic. So at least we can keep some of that vitriol and other social media out of it. So I highly recommend folks that are listening to get a Blue Sky account so they can participate, be part of the conversation. I have a starter pack. Look for abrig.bluesky.social, bsqi.social, and hit my starter pack. If you hit the starter pack, you can follow, I think, maybe 15, 20 of the best Blue Sky accounts so far, and I'll keep adding more. So you kind of start with a good group of people to follow from the get-go. Again, in Blue Sky, Heather, Blue Sky.
So he keeps enunciating Blue Sky like that because I think it sounds better as Blue Ski. No?
Can you look? I mean, another you're embarrassing yourself in front of
really do
a 1,000 people. That's not like brewski, like you're drinking some beer. It doesn't sound like a Blue Sky, like brewski. You
can meet up with your friends, have a brewski while you're on Blueski.
Oh my goodness!
I don't know. I'm just saying.
In the Baruski.
I know that Kevin Pagano agrees with me to have a brewski on the Blueski, right? I know he's in there.
You all better not make a sticker about brewskis and blueski because
I think we're gonna have to have one.
I will disown you both. See, there you go. Now Kevin showed up.
See, brewskis and blueski.
Oh my goodness. Anyways, Blue Sky. That's where it's hopping right now. So everybody go over, get my starter pack in my account, and let's keep conversing.
Okay. I agree. I do like the app though.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah.
It's kind of glitchy lately because a lot of people jumping in, millions of people at the same time. But let's stick with it. I think it's the future of the social space, short form social space, because it's not really a site. It's more of a protocol. But that's a discussion for another day. How much time we have, Heather? What should we cover? Should we start winding now? Or should we cover one more thing? I mean,
we're gonna show the Sans poster because those Sans posters are just so helpful to everyone. But this will only take me a minute, so let me throw.
What you look at, I'm gonna get people a preview for next show. I'll tell you straight up. I wanted to show how the FTK Imager version that they pushed and then pulled back, how it worked with BitLocker. So I want to show that, but I think it's gonna be an anchor for next episode. For next episode, if you're wondering how FTK Imager is gonna be working with BitLocker, we're gonna kind of show you that as a preview of their future releases that they hopefully don't pull back later.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about this poster. What do we have here?
So we have a Mac and iOS forensic analysis and incident response poster created by Catherine Headley and Sarah Edwards. It includes location of artifacts and explanations for artifacts in iOS and Mac. Let me just give a quick rundown of what we're seeing on the poster. Native applications, network information, file and folder sharing, program execution, application usage, connected and paired devices and backups, application data, deleted files and file knowledge, file folder opening, account usage, system and user information, acquiring and mounted images, volumes and external device and USB usage, and log files, and much more. So if you have not made an account on Sans, make your account and go into, I think it's the resources tab, but it's something like that. The resources tab, and find the Sans posters. There are tons of these, not just for Mac and iOS, for all different kinds of things forensics, and go grab these posters because they're awesome.
Yeah, and I appreciate that Chris was saying that the biome directory that contains SecB files, it should not be called biome. It should be called SecBs. and I agree with him. And for folks out, what is this guy talking about? So some time ago, when Knowledge C in iOS devices started kind of the data disappearing, it popped up in this biome directory in some files that we never seen before. And based on research done by John Hyla, by Geraldine Bly, and some others in the community, and me kind of attached to them, we figured out how it's parsed, and they have this header called SecB, SEGB, right? And I believe they should be called SecBs, right? Because there's SecB files outside of the biome, right? And the example I was giving Heather is like, share folders when you look at an Android app, right? Those always have XMLs. We don't call them share folder files. We call them XML files because that's the file type. And biome is not a file type. But, it's okay to agree to disagree with how they're named. But I like the fact that Chris is on my side, that maybe we should name it something else, especially since it's his fault. He's the one that at the beginning make a whole bunch of articles about it. Naming it
was so easy to do because that's the first place we saw them, and we didn't know they were everywhere else. But yeah, you're right. We should adapt with the changing times now that we see them all over the devices.
Exactly. So I wanted to make that point. Again, the poster is fine. It says biome, but everybody says biome. But little by little, I'm gonna try to have people call it SecBs instead of biomes.
Yeah. What do you think? Do you have time to briefly speak about the new release for the Leaps?
No, I don't have time, and the reason for that is that my zip file with it got corrupted, and I'm trying to open it, and it's not opening. So I had the universe gave me a hard stop. So let me just quickly verbalize something. We're making for the Leaps, and if you use it the first time you heard about them, there is a Python framework that's used to parse different extractions from iOS, A-Leaps, different things. Okay, and we have a good group of people. Johan is in the chat, one of those group. Kevin is in the chat as well. We got James also. We got John Hyla as well. Myself, Heather, and a few others. We're working really hard and to make sure that when you use this type of framework in your tooling, we're moving to a new type of reporting system. So you don't have to depend on HTML reports that could crash your browser if it's too big. We're now using what's called Lava to make that reporting. Today I got word that Johan, which is in the chat, and I couldn't. First of all, Johan is all the way in Europe, so I appreciated that he's listening at this time, whatever hour it is, ungodly hour where he's at. But he tested today with a million records, health records, the viewer that we're creating, and it handled it no problem, which you cannot
Wow.
do as an HTML report. And that
No.
will open the door for me at least. I'm the big kind of pretty much the sole maintainer of RLeap for returns from providers. And if you get a return from Facebook or Meta, it's gonna be HTML, right? And it will crash your browser. No
Right.
doubt, it will crash your browser. So now we'll have a tool to be able to make the reports lava format, and it will not. There's nothing. It will not be crashed, no matter how big it is, which I'm really excited about. What I'm gonna do next week, not next week, the next show, the week after. Although we have to look at the schedule. I don't know if
Thanksgiving.
it's Thanksgiving, so we'll have to think about that.
We'll
But
figure it out.
yeah, for the next show, I'm gonna show you how that looks within the report directory from iLeap 2.0, which is out already. And then keep your lookout for the Cyber Social Hub conference that's coming up in December, where James, he's gonna be showing Lava, like unveiling it to the world, like what we have so far. I mean, it's not ready for release yet, but we're gonna show people how it looks. So that's where we are with the leaps, and we'll give you more info in the next episode.
Very good. I think we can be at the meme of the week then.
Yeah, that's the best part of the show.
Let me share my screen here.
Johan says it's 1 a.m. where he's at.
Oh, geez. That's dedication. Thank you.
He wakes up, either he goes to bed really late or wakes up really early.
So I scoured your LinkedIn to find one of the famous Alexis Brignoni memes. I'll let you explain it.
So there's this movie that Nicolas Cage kind of plays himself, right? And the guy from The Mandalorian, he's super famous. What's his name? He's Chilean. I just miss his name. He's a great dude. So the other actor, he's playing like this drug lord, and he really admires Nicolas Cage, right? And he's Nicolas Cage kind of playing himself in the movie. And he's looking at Nicolas Cage, looking at this guy like, what the heck, right? And the other guy is really smiling at him. So Nicolas Cage says, "Examiner waiting days for a tool to parse." You know, this kind of tired looking face. And the other guy is really happy, and it says, "Me already finding the main items by hand."
Nice.
And I did that to kind of illustrate the point that sure, we have automation to help us, but it all depends, like we say in this business, right? If you need something specific, sometimes the automation is not the first thing you should do, right? Or maybe, okay, do the automation, but if you need something now, go back to your basics. Make sure you keep it, sharp as a good sharp knife, so you can cut and get to that meat quickly, right? I was talking with my not trainee anymore, my ex-trainee, because she got certified and she's not full-blown examiner.
Congratulations.
So, yeah, I'm not gonna say her name because I didn't got her permission. I didn't ask her to be in the show, right? So I'm not gonna say her name, but she just finished her certification process as a full-blown examiner, and we're reviewing, for example, how to go straight, how to find in iOS devices a particular app that's unparsed. How can I go find it straight up? I don't have to wait for the tool. Pedro Pascal, thank you, Christopher. Pedro Pascal, I love him. I'm totally in love with that guy. He can sit down and read the phone book, and I will watch it until he's done. Pedro is fantastic. Anyways, and we're back to my story. We were discussing or kind of reviewing how do we get to particular apps that are unparsed straight up without having to wait for the tools to tell me anything. And there's a couple two-step procedure using to make it. I cheat a little bit. I use iLeap for that. But I most of the work is done by hand, right? And I was actually parsing, which I just finished this today. I think it's text free or free text, one of those texting apps, right? That's not supported by any tool right now. It's by hand. That's how you do it. So yeah, let's be more Pedro Pascal and less Nick Cage in this context, right? Let's keep our knives, our tools sharp, and getting the job done.
This meme works great too with the updates. So Android 15 updated. We now have private space. Is everything parsed in private space? No. You're going to be finding the main items by hand, possibly on anything that's newly released and not yet supported by your tools. So it actually fit right into our topics for the night.
Oh, absolutely. And I think to close, I want to say share what Heather is saying, right? There's a methodology. I said Jess. I said Heather. Jess.
Yeah.
See, now it's the opposite. I was looking at her and now looking at you and reading her, so I get them all confused. You know what happened? That happens with my kids. I call one the other name all the time. Anyways, I digress. There's a methodology for parsing unsupported apps, and we need to identify them cases. And absolutely, one of the big things that I like to do when I'm brought in to speak in regards to parsing digital data, is talking about that methodology. There are steps, and there are things you as an examiner need to do of with your skill set that you've been trained to be able to get to these data structures and successfully get the data out for our stakeholders. So let's not keep track of that. Let's not keep that out of our minds, and let's keep it there. Let's do it.
Agreed.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, anything else for the good of the order, Heather?
I have nothing else. No.
Well, I want to thank, first of all, I want to thank Chris for being in the show with us. I appreciate also Magnet Forensics for letting him, allow him to talk to us in regards to what the work they've been doing on this feature. And we're more than happy to, different vendors, reach out to us and collaborate in things that to help the community. More than happy to do that. I also want to thank all the folks in the chat, all the big group of experts there, the community that we're building. Let's go to Bluesky or Blue Sky.
Yes.
So we
You
can
said it right.
Yeah, I'm just
Humoring me.
I'm just indulging you. There we go. Humoring. I like humoring is better. I'm humoring you. And thanks for all the folks in the chat. And all the folks that are gonna be listening later. You can reach out to us on our social media and in our Buzzsprout page. There's a little send us a message section that you can use and let us know your thoughts. So with that,
Yeah, I definitely want to just mirror your thanks to Chris. That was great. We could have explained the things in his blog, but nothing better than having the source of the blog come on and explain the artifacts and how he came to his conclusions. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, absolutely, and he's such a great speaker. He's really funny, but really depth, really deep in what he speaks about. So I appreciate having him here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we don't have a date for the next show, but we'll keep on out of social media. Holidays are coming, so we'll figure it out and we'll let you know.
We'll figure it out.
All right. Take care and have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.